After 3 full seasons of sprint race action, fans and competitors are still split on whether they're any good or if they're actively spoiling race weekends. What everyone is sure of is that they still need changing, and the teams and drivers have been demanding change for months. Formula One is determined that they will stay, but they have heard what everyone is saying and change is coming. But how will they fix sprint races? I'll cover all of that in today's video. It was as far back as July this year that we knew that sprint races would return for 2024. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali confirmed that there will still be just 6 sprint races in the 2024 season. With 24 races on the calendar next year, that will mean more races without sprints, which is good news for some of you. The original plan had been for 10 sprint races in 2024, but it seems that until Formula One is happy with the format of the races, they will limit the number on the schedule. Of course, this season originally had 24 races on the calendar as well, before the Emilia-Romagna and Chinese Grand Prix were cancelled. The 6 sprint races will take place in Shanghai, Miami, Spielberg, Austin, Qatar and Interlagos. Some of these are good choices. Some of them are awful though. Interlagos showed us this year that it could host a sprint race with the on-track action being incredible. It was the best example of a successful sprint weekend we've seen all season, with battles happening up and down the field for the shortened race. The Red Bull Ring has been a pretty good sprint weekend before as well, and with it returning in 2024, it's probably earned a permanent place on the sprint calendar. Shanghai is a risk. The COVID-19 pandemic meant that Formula One hasn't been to China since 2019, when Shanghai hosted the 1000th Formula One Grand Prix. The new Formula One cars haven't been there yet, so no one knows how well they'll race, and for all we know, it could provide some awful racing, and therefore a terrible sprint race. While the Chinese Grand Prix is a risk, Miami is almost guaranteed to be bad for sprint racing. The track around the Hard Rock Stadium car park has so far failed to provide any good racing, and in the shortened, less rewarding format, that isn't likely to change. The Formula One bosses know that the current format for the sprint race weekend doesn't work as well as it could. They've tinkered with it every year so far, changing the weekend schedule for 2023 or adding more points in 2022. They stopped it impacting the Grand Prix at all by giving us back the proper qualifying sessions for 2023, with Saturday being its own sprint day. The idea behind the sprint is solid. Formula One wants to provide competitive Formula One action on all 3 days of the Grand Prix weekend, instead of fans who attend on Friday only seeing the first 2 practice sessions. There have been as many suggestions for how to improve the weekend format as there are fans of the sport though. Martin Brundle believes that Formula One can create a series of thrilling Saturdays in 2024 by making tweaks to the sprint races. Brundle believes that by changing the ordering of sessions on a race weekend, you could create a spectacular Saturday of action for spectators to enjoy. The sprint format will be tweaked for next year, and qualifying for the main race will revert to Saturday afternoon, I suspect, former F1 driver Brundle explained. Saturday will become a thrilling day should they schedule the sprint race in the morning and qualifying in the afternoon. Although teams will be nervous of having sufficient time to repair any damage from the morning event. Friday will then be 1 practice session in the morning, which I believe should revert to 90 minutes, and the sprint shootout qualification in the afternoon. Another very decent day for the fans trackside and watching on TV or online. 2023 Drivers' Champion Max Verstappen won 4 of the 6 sprints on the calendar this year, and has now won 7 of the 12 sprint races since the format's introduction at the 2021 British Grand Prix. The Red Bull driver has admitted, though, that he's not entirely enamored with the extra racing, to put it politely, but Brundle believes that it is here to stay and significantly better than the traditional 3 free practice schedule. I see a lot of social media traffic, as well as talking with fans, friends and media, where many say they don't like the sprint format at all, Brundle outlined. Despite being a pure racer and having won many of them, Verstappen says the same. That's all valid opinion, but the TV audience numbers show a lot more eyeballs watching these appointments to view live sport. And that's a fact. As I said in our shows, the worst sprint will always be better than the best FP2. It isn't just the media that have been asking for change though. As I said earlier, many of the teams and drivers have been calling for improvements to be made to the format for 2024. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner has stressed the need for F1 to find a long-term fix for the sprint format, with more changes on the way in 2024. Horner is keen for the sprint to be evolved, but believes F1 must settle on a format for the long term after too much change over recent years. He told the media in Abu Dhabi, "I think it's clear that the sprints need to evolve a bit, in that I can understand the concept and it being action on all 3 days, which for the promoter and for the fans has an interest. But I think the sprints, in some cases, have been slightly underwhelming. so I think it needs a bit more work doing on it within the sporting forum. On the other hand, Haas team principal Gunther Steiner encouraged F1 to keep trying different solutions. He said, "I think the sprint weekend is very successful in general for the sport. The viewership is up. People like it, but you always try to make it better because it's not perfect yet. As long as we keep on moving along and making things better and trying new things, I think we're on the right track. And also, not being afraid to make changes, but also not being afraid if the changes don't work to go back again, or do something, go in another direction. Everyone knows that change is needed for the sprint format to be the best it can be, and change is coming for 2024 to help that happen. Not only have they changed the races that will be hosting the sprints, but the format of the weekend will be altered." At the final meeting of the F1 Commission held at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi before the final Grand Prix of the year, the main topic of discussion was the format of the sprint events for 2024 and beyond. Chaired by FIA single-seater director Nicolas Tombazis and F1 president and CEO Stefano Domenicali, the meeting of all the F1 teams with F1 and the FIA has given overall support for the format to be updated to help separate the sprint race from the main Grand Prix. What this means is that, like Martin Brundle suggested, the sprint qualifying will now take place on Friday after an FP1 session. Then the first session on Saturday will be the sprint race, followed by qualifying for the Grand Prix as the second session on Sunday. These were among a series of changes announced after a meeting at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on Friday of the F1 Commission, the sports rules think tank that includes all the teams, along with the governing body, the FIA and commercial rights holder F1. The potential changes to the sprint format have been introduced because of concerns that the current system is confusing. For the last 2 seasons, qualifying for the Grand Prix has been on Friday, before Saturdays devoted entirely to the sprint, with a qualifying session before the race. But it was felt the arrangement put too big a gap between qualifying and the Grand Prix, and raised questions about the merit of Saturday's action, as the consequences of the sprint with its reduced points are minimal. What hasn't been decided yet is how this new format will interact with Parc Ferme. For the 2023 season, the cars were in Parc Ferme as soon as qualifying for the Grand Prix started on Friday afternoon. With the qualifying for the Grand Prix not starting until the sprint race though, there are discussions about whether Parc Ferme could begin after the sprint race instead of before. Or, alternatively, there could be a separate Parc Ferme window for the sprint qualifying and race, with teams allowed to make changes between the sprint race and qualifying for the Grand Prix on Saturday. So while the change to the weekend format is going to happen, there are still some things that need to be worked out by the F1 Commission. One of those things could be one of the biggest racing regulation changes the sport has ever seen. There will be discussions over the winter about the potential for reverse grid sprint races. This could mean that Grand Prix qualifying is run, followed by a sprint race with the grid reversed for the start of the race. It is an idea that has been floated numerous times and would definitely add to the action of a sprint race. But what do you think? Should Formula 1 stop messing with the system at this point and stick with what they have? Or would you like to see them experiment with things like reverse grids more often? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.